Hi everyone, my name is Brianna Harris. I'm a registered dietitian and VitaCup's Chief Vitamin Officer. So for those of you who have never heard of VitaCup, welcome. Thank you for joining our Amazon Live, and I'll give you a little background on who we are. So we are a vitamin and superfood infused coffee and tea company. So what that means is we take all of our coffees and all of our teas and we infuse them with beneficial, essential vitamins and superfoods. So today I want to go over one of our most popular blends with you, our Genius blend, and then I'm going to give you some of my top tips on how to follow a low-carb ketogenic diet. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about our Genius line, and then I'm going to give you some of our top tips on a ketogenic diet. So I'm going to start off with our coffee from the Genius line. So our Genius line consists of three products, three blends. It's going to be our loose ground coffee, our K-Cup, and our teas. So starting with coffee, both these coffees are going to be a delicious medium roast using 100% Arabica beans from Brazil and Mexico. These are very similar with all the added vitamins, ingredients, superfoods. The only difference is one is going to be in a loose coffee form so you can add it to your favorite drip brewer, and the other is going to be in a little K-Cup so that you can add it to your K-Cup machine, and easy peasy, you're good to go. Now one thing I do want to mention is with these K-Cups that they actually are recyclable. So if you wait for it to cool off after you brew your K-Cup, if you peel off the lid, take out the coffee and filter, then you can recycle these cute little pods. So the first ingredient I want to talk about is MCT oil. So that is a medium chain triglyceride. That's just really MCT, medium chain triglyceride is a fancy word for fat. And it's the type of fat that can easily be broken down, absorbed in your body for your body to utilize as energy. But we'll go a little bit more on MCT a little bit later when I give you my top tips on how to follow this low-carb ketogenic diet. Cinnamon and turmeric is the next ingredient I want to talk about. So each one of these cups of coffee is infused with cinnamon and turmeric, and we pick those because not only are those delicious spices, but they also have been used for centuries due to their medicinal properties, and they are packed with antioxidants. And the cinnamon also gives our Genius the infamous subtle hint of sweetness from that cinnamon. Then each one of these cups of coffee is also going to have 5 essential B vitamins: vitamins B1, B5, B6, B9, and vitamin B12. These are all essential vitamins, which means that you must get them through your diet or supplementation because your body cannot make enough of them. And these are so important for so many functions in your body. They're important to take the food that you eat and to break it down for fuel for the body, and important for so many more functions in your body. So it really is a no-brainer why we added these into our Genius blend. And then we also have vitamin D in this blend, and this is the sunshine vitamin. A lot of people know that vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin because you can actually get it from going out in the sun and having the sun rays hit your body and help your body produce vitamin D. But a lot of people are actually deficient in vitamin D. So it is important to make sure that you are getting either enough exposure to that sunlight, eating enough of the vitamin D, or getting supplementation through either your cup of coffee. But those are a few ways to supplement. And one thing I do want to say as a dietitian, I always recommend following a healthy lifestyle diet, trying to get all of those vitamins and nutrients through a healthy diet, but also supplementing with these vitamins to help fill in the gaps that your diet might be lacking. And then also, if that's not enough to pump in this little tiny cup of coffee, we also added Resveratrol. So Resveratrol, for those of you who know what that word is, then you actually might be wine lovers, because Resveratrol is actually the antioxidant that you find in red wine. Why people say red wine is so healthy, because it has all those antioxidants. That's the Resveratrol. And now we can't drink wine all day long. Instead, we're going to put it in your coffee so you can have your coffee throughout your day, and then if you want a glass of red wine at night, then you're really just giving your body a lot of those good antioxidants. So to give a little recap, this coffee is going to be a medium roast using 100% Arabica beans from Brazil and Mexico, and each serving has MCT, cinnamon, turmeric, 5 B vitamins, B1, B5, B6, B9, and B12, vitamin D, and resveratrol. Now moving on to our Genius tea. This is going to be very similar in the ingredients that we have in the coffee. The main difference is it's actually going to be in a tea bag form, and it's going to be using tea instead of coffee. So our Genius tea is a black tea with chai spices. I think the cinnamon and the turmeric really complement those chai spices. So not only are you getting some good benefits from the cinnamon and the turmeric, also the other chai spices, so things like allspice and cloves. And then it has those 5 essential B vitamins, vitamin D, MCT, and like I already mentioned, cinnamon and turmeric. So very similar in what type of ingredients we add into them. It's just different coffee and tea. Now I want to share with you my top tips on how to follow a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet. So for those of you who do not know what a ketogenic diet is, it is a diet that is very, very low in carbohydrates, which is a sugar, and high in fat. And so pretty much what you want to do with this diet is you're putting your body into something called ketosis, where your body pretty much lives and survives off of fat for fuel and not from sugar or carbohydrates. So this diet is going to be very low in carbohydrate, very high in fat. And give you a little background on what are carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are types of sugars. There's complex carbohydrates and there's simple carbohydrates. So complex carbohydrates are going to be things, they're going to be the healthy sugars. They're going to be things like fruit, dairy, and whole grains. And then the simple carbohydrates are actually going to be the bad carbohydrates, and those are going to be things that are just like table sugar, simple sugars. It's going to be sodas, juices, desserts like cookies, cake, donuts. So those are really the different types of sugars when you hear complex sugars and simple sugars. So now that you kind of know a little bit what the ketogenic diet is, it's that low carbohydrate, that high fat diet. You know what a carbohydrate is. Now I'm going to give you my top tips and how to successfully follow a low carb ketogenic diet. So my first tip is to cut out all of the simple carbohydrates. This is a very important one. It's going to be so hard to be successful on a ketogenic diet if you're adding these sweets, if you're adding juices, sodas, candies, cakes. They really are just so high in carbohydrate. They're empty calories, they're pumped with sugar, and have really no other benefits to them aside from the sugar and carbohydrate. So my first recommendation or my first tip is to get rid of all of your simple carbohydrates in your diet. Now my next recommendation or tip is going to be to pay attention and to focus on how much complex carbohydrates that you're having. So the complex carbohydrates, like I was talking about earlier, are going to be things like fruits, dairy, and grains. Those are all very healthy foods, but they are high in carbohydrates. So you don't want to completely cut them out of your diet, but you really want to limit how much you're having. So we'll start with fruit. So fruit, if you think of what makes up fruit, one of the things is fructose, and that's a simple sugar. So there is going to be sugar in fruit. And it's really kind of important to know which fruits have higher sugar content than others. So for instance, a large banana or a large apple can have up to 30 grams of carbohydrate per large apple, versus if you're going to do something like a small nectarine or a cup of watermelon. So just know that not all fruits are created equal, and you kind of just have to pay attention to which fruits have more carbohydrates in them versus less, so that you can know how much fruit to have so that you can still be following this low carbohydrate diet. And of course, I would never recommend to completely give up fruit in a ketogenic diet unless you have to for a specific medical condition. But if you're just following a low carb ketogenic diet, you don't have to completely give up fruit. Fruit is healthy. It's just making sure that you're having small amounts of it. Now for grains. So for grains, these are going to be things like pasta, rice, bread, crackers. These are all grains. And so my recommendation for this would be to try to swap out your grains for low carb food. So for instance, for rice, you can try to do things like cauliflower rice. In fact, cauliflower has a lot of low carb options. Especially, I went to Trader Joe's the other day, they had cauliflower rice, they had cauliflower gnocchi, they had cauliflower mashed potatoes. So really, it's swapping out these high carbohydrate food for cauliflower, and cauliflower it's a very healthy alternative. It's really high in choline and it tastes great. For instance, if you want to swap out pasta, you can do things like zoodles, which is zucchini noodles. go buy a spiralizer and you can turn a lot of your non-starchy vegetables into zoodles or koodles. I guess those are carrot noodles. And then you could also do things like tofu noodles that they have out there too that are super low in carbohydrate. I think 1 pack alone is like 1 carbohydrate. So those are some alternatives you can use for pasta. And then for bread you could either do things like lettuce wraps, or you could even make a low carbohydrate bread. They have things on the internet called cloud bread, or if you just type in easy low carb mug bread, you'll see that there's recipes where all you have to do is mix about 4 ingredients. It's usually like eggs, salt, oil, baking soda, and then instead of the refined flour, you can add things like coconut flour or almond flour, and then you put that in the microwave, follow the instructions, usually it's like 1 to 2 minutes, and then voila, you have this beautiful kind of roll of low carb bread. You can cut it up and serve that instead of bread. So those are some options for grains. Now for dairy, so kind of like what I was explaining with fruit, how fructose is in fruit, well, lactose is in dairy. So if you look at a glass of milk, there's going to be protein in there. There's going to be calcium. There's going to be the lactose, which is the sugar. There's going to be a lot of different components. And a glass of milk actually can be anywhere from like 12 to 15 grams of carbohydrates. So that is a lot just for 1 glass. So my recommendation would be to swap out your dairy milk with I guess dairy alternatives. So things like rice milk, almond milk, soy milk, coconut milk, those are all going to be a lot lower in carbohydrates. Some of them, especially if you do unsweetened, then some of those are even, 1 or 2 grams of carbohydrate per glass instead of 12 to 15. Now I also want to touch on protein and vegetables. So even though those aren't really considered in the carbohydrate family, we'll start with vegetables. So vegetables do have carbohydrates in them, but it is a lot less than fruit. So this is a good thing to add to your diet. It's going to be high in nutrients, high in vitamins, high in fiber, and then instead of having a lot of the sugar like the fruit, then it's going to be lower carbohydrate, lower sugar. So the main thing though when you are picking out your vegetables is to stay away from starchy vegetables. So stay away from things like corn and potatoes. When you are picking your vegetables, you want them to be non-starchy vegetables. So things like bell peppers, cucumbers, celery, those are all great vegetables that are non-starchy, and really just staying away from that corn and potatoes. And now for protein. So protein is a great thing to add into your ketogenic diet because it is essentially carb-free. And so you can have a lot of extra protein with your meals to help get the calories and satiety that you need, but without adding a lot of extra carbohydrates. So the one recommendation I want to give you with protein is to prepare it so that it stays low carb. Do not go out and get things like fried chicken or fish and chips, because that is going to have a breading on the chicken and the fish, and then that's going to add carbohydrates to something where you could have a meal that essentially is grilled vegetables and a salad and protein, where it would be a very great low carb, high fat diet, but now by adding that breading on it, now you're adding a lot of sugar. Another thing to pay attention to is sauces. So if once again you're making this beautiful meal that's going to be a ketogenic, a low carb, high fat meal, by adding certain sauces, it can actually kick you out of ketosis and make that meal now a high sugary meal. So for instance, if you're going to put barbecue sauce on your chicken, 2 tablespoons alone has 10 grams of carbohydrates, and another one would be like teriyaki sauce. So just pay attention when you're going to the store, when you're picking out your sauces and salad dressings, look at the nutrition fact label, see what the serving size is, and then see how many carbohydrates. And always pay attention to the serving size, because you could get fooled where you're like, oh man, this is great, this sauce only has 2 carbohydrates, but then if you look at the serving size and it's half a teaspoon and you have to put 9 of those on your chicken to give it flavor, then you actually, now you're putting 18 grams of carbohydrates on your chicken. So pay attention to the serving size, and just when you're going to the store, read the nutrition fact label, look at the carbohydrates. Now, those are going to be all of my tips that are going to be on what types of, foods to kind of pick between the different food groups. My next recommendation is going to be increase your MCTs. So a little earlier I was telling you that what MCT is. It's a medium chain triglyceride. and a triglyceride is a fancy word for a type of fat. In fact, it's a glycerol chain that has 3 fatty acids on it. That's what a triglyceride is. So it's this type of fat. And how big that chain is, how long that chain is what either makes it a short chain, a medium chain, or a long chain triglyceride. And based on that chain length, that's actually what is going to give the fat the benefits and the functions to your body. So when I talk about an MCT, medium chain triglyceride, this is a medium chain. So it's anywhere from C6, so 6 carbons, to 12 carbons. Now, the two that I actually really want you to focus on are carbon 8 and carbon 10, C8 and C10. Or if you're at the store, you can look for C8, C10, or look for caprylic and capric acid, because those are the two that actually can be absorbed easier into the body and broken down into ketones for your body and your brain to use as energy. So when you eat medium chain triglycerides, and why they are great for this ketogenic diet is because you eat them, they easily are absorbed into your body, and then your body can break the MCTs down to something called ketones. So what ketones are is it's a type of energy source that your body can use for energy. So think if you're following just a normal westernized diet, you're gonna have a lot of carbohydrates in your diet. You eat those carbohydrates, they break down into glucose, and then your body uses glucose. Primarily, your brain uses glucose for fuel. But if you cut out carbohydrates and now you are adding in these, adding in more fats and especially MCTs, then your body can break those down to ketones, and then your body doesn't have the glucose to use for fuel, so it starts using ketones. Now, once it runs out of the ketones that you're eating, then it actually can go to your fat stores, convert those into ketones too, and now you are burning ketones to fuel your body. So that's how you lose weight. Instead of having high carbs where you're solely just burning off the glucose, eating fat still, and so those are just going and storing in your body, you now are converting all the fat stores in your body into something called ketones for your body to use as energy. And now ketones are special too because they actually can cross the brain barrier, where your brain usually uses glucose for fuel, but when you only have the ketones to fuel your body, then your brain can actually use those for fuel as well. So those are just a few things about what MCTs are, how they get broken down into ketones, and how your body and your brain can use those for fuels. And kind of going back to is talking about, by having this low carbohydrate, high fat, then it's gonna help you get rid of a lot of your fat stores because your body needs those to burn for energy. So those are my top tips on how to follow a low carb ketogenic diet. You want low carbohydrates, and you want high fat, particularly MCTs. You want to completely get rid of the simple carbohydrates, so things like juices, Cokes, desserts, and you want to limit how much complex carbs you're having, so be careful on how much fruit, grains, and dairy you are eating. And when you prepare your vegetables and your protein, make sure that they're non-starchy and that they are not going to be breaded or with a lot of sauce. And those are all of my top tips on how to follow this low carb, high fat ketogenic diet. So going back to our Genius line, we have 3 products under our Genius line. We have our ground coffee, has the MCT, cinnamon, turmeric, 5 B vitamins, vitamin D, and resveratrol. Same thing in our K-Cups, and same thing in our tea, where it's going to have the MCT, cinnamon, turmeric, 5 B vitamins, and vitamin D. So I hope you enjoyed learning about our Genius line, which is our most popular blend, and a little bit on how to follow this ketogenic diet.